When you walk through Angkor Wat and the ruins of that great Khmer civilization in the jungle, it makes you wonder, what is a civilization? You might also wonder, what makes a civilization collapse and become stone ruins in a jungle, overtaken by the jungle, by the environment? And are there other civilizations that are more enduring, more successful, less likely to collapse, that might even be a foundation for a global civilization, or the end of history, like some imagine Western civilization to be? But first of all, you have to ask the question, what is civilization? I'm Jeff Rich, this is the Burning Archive, and I try to help you see the world more clearly with some quality world history on this channel. Why don't you like this video right now and subscribe? Now, many of us feel a little bit uneasy about using the term civilization. It seems old-fashioned. Doesn't culture mean the same thing? Sometimes it gets used to assert superiority. I am civilized. They are rednecks, bogans, primitives, barbarians, outsiders, Stone Age relics, whatever the insult might be. And today, the term civilization is used in big geopolitical debates. People want to save Western civilization, or they want Western civilization to fall, or they might want to assert the power and the influence of a Chinese civilization state or an Indian civilization state. Samuel Huntington's classic book from the 1990s, Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of World Order, put this kind of point of view. It put the idea of civilizations right at the heart of geopolitics. And in a way, the Russian philosopher Alexander Dugin is doing a similar thing from a different perspective today. But although the term civilization makes many of us, a little bit uneasy, we do need to find a way to use it sensitively and sensibly. People keep coming back to this term that expresses some kind of affinity between societies and cultures that goes beyond what we understand by those terms. So, is there a way we can use the term without all that baggage and actually learn something about world history and the cultures that we live among? In general, there are four main ways that people have used the term civilization in discussing world history and geopolitics. One way is to use civilization to mean continuities in ways of life. The idea that there was a Mediterranean civilization, a common way of life, a diet, a use of the sea, all that sort of thing. Another idea is to talk about a common religion or world order. Islamic civilization, Orthodox civilization, Buddhist, Hindu, Christian civilization. And this idea of common religion or world order underpinned Samuel Huntington's book, The Clash of Civilizations. Fundamentally, he put forward an idea of civilizations as religious communities. A third way is to talk about a form of collective self-differentiation. I am civilized, they are barbarians. I belong to the civilized world, country X does not. And then a fourth way of talking about it is as the final climactic stage of social development, the ultimate in human achievement, the sum of human achievements and social development. And it is often contrasted to more primitive, less advanced societies, to use terms that people use without endorsing those terms. And while we avoid explicit references to primitives and barbarians these days, that idea still often creeps back into our language, especially when we believe we are defending something precious to us in the civilized world. But this kind of usage has a rich history and accounts for much of the baggage that we feel and that sense of unease that I and you may well have when we use the term civilization. How can we really call ourselves civilized when horrible, horrible things are happening to other people around the world? Fundamentally, the problems with these kind of ways of using the term civilization come down to what one historian described as the checklist problem of defining civilization. To be a civilization, you've got to have, and here we mark off the checklist, you've got to have writing, you've got to have great art, you've got to have agriculture, you've got to have cities. There's a checklist of certain features that have got to be ticked off in order to be civilized. And this intrinsically then plays into the problem of thinking, I am civilized, I have these attributes, and the attributes that I have, I've put on the list of civilized societies, and that strange mob over there are not civilized. And there are three common problems with this way of thinking about civilization today and thinking about civilizations in history. First of all, civilization is not the same as progress. It may well be that over time in history we get better at certain things and worse at certain things, but civilization itself represents a more neutral process of change. It doesn't represent climbing the hill of progress in history. You don't win the game of history by becoming the best civilization in the world. And perhaps the clearest way of seeing the gains and the losses of civilization is to look at the impact of civilizations on the environment. We have achieved so much in the many modern civilizations that are technological, industrial civilizations around the world, but we have also put at risk our cultures, our societies, with the impact of so much industry on the environment. And sometimes civilizations rise at the cost of other peoples, of other civilizations as well. So there are gains and losses, and history is not a linear line of progress. The second big problem is, well, there's more than just one civilization. There are many civilizations, and the fundamental mind shift one really needs to do to think about the history of civilizations properly is have that pluralist mindset, to not fixate on your civilization as the one pure example of the best civilization in the world, but rather to see the many virtues of many different kinds of civilization, and then to wonder, well, what generates this huge diversity in ways of life, of cultural achievements, of technological innovations, of social organisation across so many societies over time and over the face of the earth. There's not one civilized world. There's one world that has been civilized in many, many different ways. And that brings us to the third problem with the sort of checklist approach, the traditional approach to defining civilization, because civilization is not a state of being as such. It's not a final end state of human society. Civilization is perhaps best thought of as a process. It's not a state, it's not an end state, it's not a checklist, it's not something you can tick off a checklist. It's not the sum of human achievement, it's an ongoing process. And this, more than anything else, can help shift our way of thinking about cultures, civilizations, and different societies across world history. It's a little bit, if you like thinking about evolutionary thinking with natural selection as a process that doesn't arrange things in terms of one thing is better than another, but generates all sorts of different responses over time. Now, the historian who really outlined these problems best and really has perhaps given us the best modern overview of civilizations in world history is a Spanish, British, American historian, Felipe Fernandez Amesto. And in his book Civilizations from the year 2000, he didn't just say, let's just throw out the term civilization. It's got these problems. No one should use it anymore. And he didn't just try to invent a new fangled term to say the same thing like world order. He said if people keep coming back to this term civilization, perhaps there's something valuable in it. So what is that thing? What is that civilizing ingredient? And in a way for him, the image of the garden, an image of sophistication and beauty in many civilizations, became a symbol of what the civilizing process was. And moreover, the ruins of Angkor Wat became a symbol of the risk and the struggle of the civilizing process. How can civilizations fight back the forces of those huge trees and vines and plants that ultimately overwhelmed it? How can civilization adapt the environment in which it is developed? So Felipe Fernandez Amesto defined civilization not as the best society there can be, not as my society, not as the ultimate in human achievement, not as the best art history like Kenneth Clark's famous documentary on civilization. He defined it as a relationship to the environment, and a relationship that's expressed in many, many cultural ways, both in terms of how people react with other cultures and peoples, but also how they ate, what they grew, how they used the substance of the environment around them, and how they perceive the environment and themselves with their imaginations and their ideas. It's very much an idea that sees history, or human history, if you like, as a form of historical ecology. We, after all, are part of the environment too. How do we, in our civilizations, adapt that environment to our needs? And look, there are some great benefits for you if you're exploring world history, if you're curious about the idea of civilizations, of thinking about the idea of civilizations in this sort of objective, fair-minded way, pluralistic way, as a process of adapting the environment to human needs and in response to relationships with other peoples and cultures, rather than thinking as civilizations as boxes on a map that are solely defined by their inherent essential attributes. It's defined as a relationship to the external world of nature and the external worlds of peoples. It offers a change of perspective. It uses a real and objective criteria for distinguishing between types of civilization rather than subjective factors of my civilization is best and the rest I reject. And it lets you engage in a dialogue with the enormous tradition in history of writing about civilization and gives you some perspective on those writings without you having to buy into all those outdated ideas of civilization as in contrast to barbarians and primitives, and there is only one true great civilization. Most of all, it reveals a deep truth, I think, about the realities of our world today and across world history. Felipe Fernandez Armesto writes, "No part of the world is uniquely privileged, no people uniquely fitted for civilization." Now, while it might be easier to make a life here in sunny Melbourne compared to the frozen Arctic, nevertheless, all places on Earth have seen civilizations flourish and adapt often astonishingly harsh environments to human needs. And all of those civilizations can be celebrated. He writes, "People's capacity to lead civilized lives in unpromising places remains dazzling." And if you would like an introduction to that dazzling diversity of civilizations in world history, in a way that also tells the truth about all the tragedies of civilization, including our own, then you might want to enroll in my online history course, World History Explorers, Season 1, Civilizations. Together, we will go on a world tour of world history and meet some surprising civilizations in all parts of the world by reading over 12 weeks Felipe Fernandez Armesto's wonderful book, Civilizations. In 90 days, you will read and master a classic masterpiece of world history and become much better informed about the world you live in today, its history, its many cultures, its stunning plurality and dazzling cultural achievements. And you can join World History Explorers today by clicking on the link in the description and the pinned comment, and I hope to see you soon.